Hi everyone, welcome to the Age of Learning channel. As always, we're going deep into the esoteric teachings and symbols within the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. You're going to be able to see the story of each card by the time we're through, and you learn, I think, tarot much faster that way. So we're looking at cards of Light Seers, the RWS, the Witch's Tarot, and the Everyday Witch. But I'm first just going to put on, excuse my nails are really bad, sorry about that. So here we have the Death card. When I looked at all of these symbols, and I've been writing up notes about it, I realised that this card is about the death of our ego mask. And I'll go in and explain what that means, but for now, bear that in mind. This is going to be a long video, so get a cup of tea, a few biscuits, and probably get out your death card as well while I talk through it, because there are so many wonderful symbols and they all mean something. It's really magical. It's one of my favourites. Okay, so our higher self basically wants whatever it is, whatever lesson it wants us to learn, to stop, so that something in it has to die. And that's either it's usually our ego, but this is why it's known as the Death card, because something has to die. But it's not, you know, if you got this card, I wouldn't necessarily say someone's about to drop dead. It's more than likely it's a part of you which is being asked to die, or a part of somebody else which needs to die in order for them to progress to that next stage of being, you know, a whole normal human being. What I found through a bit of meditation while going through this wonderful card, I realised that our higher self loves to mix it up for us, and it will keep doing that perpetually through life, in order to get us to a place where we are authentic. And being authentic is kind of the opposite to having that, being living and having our ego driven by, our ego driving in the car, basically. Really, it should be our authentic self driving, not our ego. And you'll have a death happen in your life, a change, when that needs to happen, and somehow the ego's started to drive the car. And this is a way that higher self says, okay, your ego has to go in the back and your authentic self has to start driving the car again. So life and death are constantly in perpetual motion, the going in and going out of life, the rotating door of our life experience. But death is not just physical, it's situational, it can be a relationship or an idea or hope. But mostly it's the death of our ego, the part of us who thinks it knows what it wants for its own egotistical ways, but it needs to surrender to Creator God or our higher self who knows better than us. So the skeleton in this card represents eternity. So going back to medieval days, once all the flesh is dissolved, then the skeletons were often really viewed as holy relics, because they viewed them as living eternally, you know, living forever. So here you've got someone, your spirit, you live forever, and you've got the armour. The armour is black. That sometimes can be seen as, you know, destructive or dark energy. But I kind of think it, a lot of the times it means deep spiritual abysses, and abysses in a positive way, not a negative way. So we have somebody who lives forever, who needs to be living in this deep, dark abyss of spirituality, who is on top of a white horse. White repels darkness and symbolises purity, but also neutrality and nothingness. He is holding that eternal being, a white rose, which symbolizes the desire to be purified, to get rid of the ego. And when the ego is surrendered by the individual's selfish thoughts and needs will die. So what a freeing possibility. And all this takes is for the rider to get rid of whatever is binding them and letting their ego rule. So I kind of tend to say it like this: if you're in a car, who is driving? Is it your ego, or is it your higher self? Is it your authentic self? Who's driving? This card is all about saying, I want you to release the ego's grip, and the ego generally is full of fear, doesn't want to die, and will have quite kind of a death grip on the situation. And often your higher self will bring in a death scenario to shake you up a bit, so that you can go, God, what was I thinking? I let my ego get away with me there. Yes, of course, I should have behaved this way. My attitude should have been different. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't actually happy. And I need to come back to God, need to come back to my higher self and my creator God, and I need to start over again. And so something has to die in order for you to see the light. The sun that rises between the two pillars, as well as this little boat. Can you see this little boat? I haven't got my let me just get it. See if I can get it. Oh no, I can't find my pause button. Okay, take my word for it. This little Viking boat, a longship over here. And when I look at that, it kind of, I see it on this very large river, and there's all sorts of ponds. There's lots of blue representing watery emotions. We are pulled and we live in seas of emotion. And I go to explain in other cards more in depth what water means. But here it's usually, you could look at this as the journey that we're on, or what they stick you in when you die. But here it reminds me of the pillars when the Vikings would go through to the land of the kind of where they die. I've forgotten what it's called now. I'm thinking of Ragnarok now. Viking show. But you've got to let that die. So here you've got symbols of kind of going spiritually home. I know it's represented as like the funeral pyre that's set ablaze, and you go through the two pillars before you enter into the gates of heaven, but it's symbolizing something has to die. You have here, quite amazingly, we've got the king who's actually completely dead. You've got the Pope, or the papal figure, who's submitting to death, to ego. You've got the maiden and the little child. And so you've got everybody from small to old, young and beautiful. And you've got the papal figures there. All must submit. So the ego belongs to the conscious world, and the body it belongs in whilst it's living this earthly eternal life where there's duality, and duality rules prominently throughout our life. I don't think we make any thought or decision without being aware of the yin and the yang. A world we are constantly torn between all these different mindsets, and fighting in our heads of what we want to think and what we should think about. And the ego is battling inside of us against what the eternal spirit would have us believe. So if only we were apart from this struggle, everything would be fine, but we're not. Once we leave this body, we know that we'll no longer dwell on the things that we used to deem as so important. They'll just evaporate after we've physically died. But our job on earth is to reconnect to God, Creator God, and our higher self, while battling with our ego all the time. I mean, what a game. It's like Hunger Games and the Matrix and the Gladiator, sort of, you know, all rolled into one. The biggest mistake that we can make in this life is to not realize that this is a game, and these are the rules. You know, all we have to do is love, to love everything, to be satisfied and in gratitude, and let the ego die, reconnect with our higher self, ascend spiritually, because we are, spirits living in a body, not bodies who have a spirit. And then once we kind of understand the game of that, the battle of the ego is so much easier. So I think that is pretty much it. It's a number 13. So number 13, put it together, the 1 and the 3, and you get 4. So this is really a mirror card of the Emperor card, you know, where the Emperor card looks at outer social self, and really this card is saying that outer social self, that mask that we wear, which our ego loves, must die. You know, that feeling of being superior to others. This is a no card. Its planet is Pluto, and it's an element of water, and it's a Scorpio card. The death card can signify time to change or a fear of changing. I looked at the tales of Beedle the Bard in Harry Potter the other day, because me and my kids are all reading that, and have a look at the YouTube narration of it, because it really speaks brilliantly on this whole concept of the 3 brothers who met death, and their ego played a part in the subsequent events that led eventually to their deaths in one way or another. In its most upright meaning, it should show that something has to die, as I've already explained. Habits, toxic relationships, you know. Reversed then shows somebody who isn't moving forward, refuses to change, completely asleep. Asleep people are constantly riding in the ego. They're constantly having the ego in the driver's seat of their car and letting it ride. And I can pretty much safely say, I think most people can safely say, that if you are living by the death card, you are awake. You are aware. If it is opposite, then you are not awake, you are asleep, and you are completely riding with your ego, and your ego is taking center stage. Looking at the other cards here, so how do these, very quickly, because we're on the end straight now, and it's 14 minutes, that's not so bad, my goodness. Here we've got a perfect picture. You've got this beautiful red, it's called here with the Light Seers card, Death Rebirth, as a bit of a hint. You've got this kind of grey black, I suppose, to represent the blackness here, the that is usually represented, but everywhere else it's showing, okay, so death is coming, but look at what it's bringing. Look at what will happen afterwards if you release that ego and you release what is binding you. And what a great card. Just let that sink into what I've been saying. So now, do you understand that when you get the death card, you should embrace it? This is something, when I see, I go, phew, okay, it's meant to happen, that's fine, something better's coming along. I have to learn to let go of whatever it needs to go. Here we've got a lot of the emblems. You've got skull and crossbones even is exactly the same. And you've got the little boy here who is happy and he's offering flowers to death because he realizes, oh my goodness, I am so glad that you're here. Something's about to change. He could have had a nasty stepmother, an evil stepmother, and he's going, oh, change, something's happening, you know. And his loving father divorces the witch of a stepmother, and he's grateful for the change. You've got the two pillars here, kind of denoting that Nordic kind of going passage to whatever it is. I'm really sorry, I've forgotten. Yeah, and then here's, I love, this is one of the reasons why I got the Everyday Witch deck, because it's death cutting the cord. How amazing. When I have spoken to people in my old practice, because I'm not doing hypnotherapy at the moment, but there'd often be cords between mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, but often children to mothers, and the cord had to be cut. There was a toxic relationship that was going on, and death comes as a saviour, as a being of light, and he comes to kill that cord which is keeping both of them in this toxic situation. You've got the black cat. It looks like it's just nabbed a rat. You've got the door that's slightly ajar saying, you know what, once I've cut this cord, you're out of prison and you're free to go through that doorway to new possibilities. So hopefully it makes you understand about, and hopefully you can remember about that death being the ego mask that we wear. I'll give you, for instance, so you're a mother who goes to Mother and Baby Club and you put on a mask. Why do you put on a mask of being respectable, happy? You know, the house may be a mess. You may hardly have had time to have a wash. You've got the baby in the pushchair and you've sort of grabbed various bottles to feed it, but you've not had breakfast, but you go there and you pretend that, oh, you're on top of it all. You're wearing a mask. That's ego. You go to work, everything's going to pot at home, or you're not feeling very confident in the work that you are doing, and so naturally, as is with most people, you put on a mask that everything is going well. That's ego. You may say, well, we have to do that, otherwise, we can't survive. We'd get the sack if they knew how worried we were. But sometimes it's very difficult for us to let go of that mask with everyone. So I am really good at my job. I am very competent. Who am I kidding? But I'm going to pretend that to everyone. But then it slips into people, let's say, in other groups, with family, then friends. And before you know it, you're actually not living your true authentic self. And this is what I really want you to get hold of. You're not happy. If you're not living your true authentic self, you're not happy. you're miserable. And sometimes when you get the sack and the death card, the death card pops into your life, you get the sack and suddenly you go, thank goodness, in one sense, because I don't actually have to fake it anymore. That was exhausting, having that ego mask on, because I didn't want to lose face in front of other people. But the death never comes into your life without showing you the light and a new opportunity that's better for you. And if you're expectant and hopeful of that, then, all good. And, remember, the people, whether you're king or a little child, all have to surrender to the ego. They all have to surrender to this. I mean, little children just live. They're just like walking, breathing egos, aren't they? I want. It's as we grow up, we should be letting go of that ego. Some people still walk around at 80 years of age acting like a 3-year-old. They have never surrendered probably in their life. So when I see a white background, it is generally always a neutral. Have I said this? It's always a neutral. It's not personal card. It's for everybody. It's not personal. There's nothing emotional about it, but there is death. It is coming. It is for your betterment. And it's what the higher self does in order to shake you up, to get you to surrender your ego and be more authentic. And that is all I'm going to say on that. Thank you for listening. Bye.